police state, in my opinion, using the scapegoat of the immigrant, because nobody just volunteers for a police state because no one wants to live in one. You have to convince people that they have to live in one. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show, everybody. Keaton and Russ from Due Dissidents here for Jimmy while he is on the road. It's on Toronto, July 17th, Red Bank, New Jersey on the 18th, Northampton, Massachusetts on the 19th, Concord, New Hampshire on the 20th. Go to jimmydore.com for tickets. All right, folks, let's talk a little bit about this ICE expansion. Obviously, the big, beautiful bill gave a lot of funding to ICE, and they are taking advantage here. ICE declares millions of undocumented immigrants ineligible for bond hearings. A memo from the agency's acting director instructs officers to hold immigrants who entered the country illegally for the duration of their removal proceedings, which can take months or even years. The Trump administration has declared that immigrants who arrived in the United States illegally are no longer eligible for a bond hearing as they fight deportation proceedings in court, according to documents reviewed by the Washington Post. In a July 8th memo, Todd M. Lyons, acting director of ICE, told officers that such immigrants should be detained for the duration of their removal proceedings, which can take months or years. Lawyers say the policy will apply to millions of immigrants who crossed the U.S.-Mexico border over the past few decades, including under the Biden administration. In the past, immigrants residing in the U.S. interior generally have been allowed to request a bond hearing before an immigration judge. But Lyons wrote that the Trump administration's Departments of Homeland Security and Justice had revisited its legal position on detention and release authorities and determined that such immigrants may not be released from ICE custody. In rare exceptions, immigrants may be released on parole, but that decision will be up to an immigration officer, not a judge, he wrote. So in case you're confused, what's the difference between an immigration officer and a judge? Here is Ron DeSantis clearing that up in advance of the Alligator Alcatraz opening.
Immigration judge. These are not Article 3. This idea of immigration judge, these are not Article 3 judges. They're not federal judges like we think of. These are executive branch employees who are called immigration judges. So you can have pretty much, you can deputize different employees to do that. So we've offered some of our National Guardsmen to be able to serve as immigration judges. So what you could have is, okay, someone's a criminal alien, they obviously fast track. Someone has an order of deportation, okay, fast track. Someone may have just gotten picked up. They come, they can get like a notice to appear. Biden would tell you to come in 2 years. I mean, under the Trump administration, it's usually within, 14 to 30 days. But we can have our National Guard acting as immigration judges right on site. So you go, maybe you have a day or two, whatever, and then a decision's made, and then that's it. So this is potentially be a force multiplier.
Okay, so a lot of these immigration officials or immigration judges are not judicial branch judges the way we think. That's what Ron DeSantis says here. And he also says there, speaking of the Alligator Alcatraz jail, that there are different distinctions between certain people who are held there, including criminals, which he said, but also people who have removal orders and people who are just picked up. So this idea that they are distinguishing between violent criminals and only going after the worst of the worst and locking them up indefinitely in these ICE centers is wrong by their own admission. I mean, you just heard it right there from his mouth. So what you could have here are people who are detained, not charged with a crime, and held for God knows how long until they figure out where to put them. Now, hopefully, and I just say this hopefully just out of mercy for the people who end up in this situation, hopefully with all this investment, they'll figure this out quickly and get people moving quickly, because they're saying they hope to have capacity for 100,000 per day. So if they're trying to deport tens of millions, then you hope that they just don't have room to keep people for years. But they reserve that right. And certainly there are going to be some horror stories that result from this. The pattern here, folks, is that the immigration issue is being used as a pretext to build a police state. That's really what this is about. The sweeping new detention policy comes days after Congress passed a spending package that will allocate $45 billion over the next 4 years to lock up immigrants for civil deportation proceedings. The measure will allow ICE to roughly double the nation's immigrant detention capacity to 100,000 people a day. Since the memos were issued last week, the American Immigration Lawyers Association said members had reported that immigrants were being denied bond hearings in more than a dozen immigration courts across the United States, including in New York, Virginia, Oregon, North Carolina, Ohio, and Georgia. The Department of Justice oversees the immigration court. So this is not up to the states. It doesn't matter. Red state, blue state, doesn't matter, right? This is their way of putting in place nationwide a method of detaining even more people, said Greg Chen, Senior Director of Government Relations for the American Immigration Lawyers Association. It's requiring the detention of far more people without any real review of their individual circumstances. ICE said in a statement that the new policy, quote, closes a loophole in the nation's immigration laws and ensures that everyone who entered the United States without permission is treated equally. Okay, well, people should be treated equally in the sense that they all have equal rights under the law. But according to you guys, you weren't going to treat every case equally. What this says is we are applying a blanket approach to every case. I thought first you're targeting violent criminals. It makes sense that you have to detain violent criminals. They come into the country and they are committing violent crimes, and you have to keep them detained so they don't continue to commit violent crimes. That makes sense. But if someone is here on a civil immigration offense, do they have to be locked in a cage indefinitely? What if they're not charged with any crime? Isn't the whole point that you're supposed to distinguish between the worst of the worst and everyone else? I thought that was supposed to be the plan, although I never believed it, I must say. So this is a great article by a friend of the Jimmy Dore show. I know Derek Bros, and a friend of ours. He was on Misty Winston's show as well. So he runs a site called The Conscious Resistance. A great writer here. Trump's Big Brother bill expands the U.S. surveillance state. So like I said, this is just one element. This obviously just massive investment that they're making in building new jails and denying bond hearings so they can keep people in these jails as long as they want, more or less. This is part of a broader effort to beef up the surveillance state and the police state, in my opinion, using the scapegoat of the immigrant, because nobody just volunteers for a police state because no one wants to live in one. You have to convince people that they have to live in one because you need the police state to protect you from Group X. And now we have our Group X of the 2020s. Group X after September 11th was the Muslim man. Group X during the Trump era, or the first Trump era, was the white nationalist, right? They tried to say, I mean, that's a lot of what the January 6th crackdown was, right? And now here you have your next out group that justifies the beefing up of the surveillance state. So Derek writes, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, also known as House Resolution 1, gives more than $175 billion in immigration funding for 2025 alone. So that is ICE plus all of the other immigration enforcement-related funding, subsidizing of state and local, police departments, and all kinds of other things besides ICE. All right, so 175 total for 2025. While opponents of illegal immigration may cheer this funding, we should take note that $30 billion is for digital modernization efforts involving AI and biometric surveillance. Immigration and Customs Enforcement will receive $2.5 billion specifically for AI systems, biometric data collection platforms, and digital case tracking. So I must ask, did you vote for this? Right? Maybe you voted for deportation. Did you vote for this? Under the heading U.S. Customs and Border Protection Technology, vetting activities, and other efforts to enhance border security, the bill gives $637 million for the deployment of technology relating to the biometric entry and exit system under Section 7208 of the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004. The section also states that the funds may only be used for the procurement of deployment of surveillance towers after they have been tested and accepted by U.S. Border Patrol. The mention of a biometric entry-exit system and surveillance towers is perfectly in line with the long-term plans of the U.S. government and Donald Trump during his first administration. In fact, I've argued, meaning Derek, the writer of the article, since Trump's election in 2016, that the issue of immigration would be used to divide the masses and help usher in the final stages of the American police state. So here is the video embedded in the tweet from the last American vagabond, who Derek works with as well. It will be by air, by land, and by sea, according to Trump. So that's not just immigrants. Welcome to your Freedom MAGA biometric tracking system. This was during the 2016 campaign. Simpler times. They found this video. This was posted 2 days before Inauguration Day this year. But here he is almost 10 years ago.
We will finally complete the biometric entry-exit visa tracking system, which we need desperately. For years, Congress has required biometric entry-exit visa tracking systems, but it has never been completed. The politicians are all talk, no action, never happens, never happens. Hillary Clinton, all talk. Unfortunately, when there is action, it's always the wrong decision. Do you ever notice? In my administration, we will ensure that this system is in place. And I will tell you, it will be on land, it will be on sea, it will be in air. We will have a proper tracking system.
Whitney Webb says, hope Trump supporters, this is again January 17th of this year, hope Trump supporters will soon catch on to how the virtual border wall being built by companies backed by Peter Thiel on Bilderberg's steering committee is meant to serve as a Trojan horse for digital ID by requiring not just foreigners entering the U.S., but any American traveling abroad to submit to a digital biometric entry-exit system. So, I think what happened here is that a lot of people saw that there was chaos at the border under Biden, and so they voted for mass deportations thinking, well, this sounds kind of simple and the case seems kind of open and shut, right? If someone is here illegally, that means they're not supposed to be here. How can you possibly argue against taking them from where they're not supposed to be and putting them in their home country where they are supposed to be, right? How could you argue against that? It's an open and shut case. It's simple, right? Except in reality, it's very often not that simple. What if you don't know exactly who the person is or where to send them? Then you got to find a place to send them, right? In the meantime, what do you got to do? You have to hold them, right? Because if they're not supposed to be here and you can't find where to put them, then you got to build a jail for them, right? So right there, you're talking about mass deportations. You can't have mass deportations at that point without mass incarceration, because in order to figure out where these people are going, you need a place to keep them. And in the interim, they're going to be in jail. You can't have mass incarceration without a police state, because you need people to go out and grab the people to put them in the jails before you figure out where to put them. So there's just no way to build a deportation machine without building an incarceration machine. And there's no way to build an incarceration machine without building a police state. So you can't have mass deportations without a police state. And it seems, the more we look at it and the more we look into it, that really the mass deportations was the pitch that they made that seemed very simple. People signed up for it, and they took that as permission to go ahead and build their police state, which now, again, going back to the beginning of the show and my theory that maybe the DOJ decided, you know what, now that we got this big, beautiful bill passed, we can release a memo about the Epstein files, and that'll cause Trump to have a meltdown, and maybe we don't need him anymore because this is done now. It's done. They did it. They got their bill. ICE got their funding. They're building this. Palantir's got the contracts. The wheels are in motion. They don't need Donald Trump anymore. At this point, it's probably in their interest to force him out of office, get J.D. Vance a couple years under his belt so he runs with the incumbency advantage in 2028, as opposed to having to run with the baggage of this first Trump term. That's a theory, but that's as good as I can come up with. What's not so much speculation on my part, which I think is a little more well-founded than that, is that, this deportation thing was the propaganda that they fed you in order to justify building this massive techno-police state, which now is under construction and getting done pretty quickly.
Well, hey, man, this is why I keep saying that wasn't no bullet, man. That was a McDonald's pack of ketchup slapped on his ear, man. It slapped on his ear. Come on. Isn't this the Bill Gates mark of the beast shit that so many people who voted for Trump are so worried about?
Yeah.
Right? They're going to get all tracked and biometrics. You're going to be living a Minority Report, man, where you're going to have little sensors on the street that can just pick your face out of a crowd and send the authorities after you. That's what this leads to. And when you look at what's happened with the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned of, he warned, hey, once these businesses are really dependent on war, they're going to own your government. You're never going to see an end to war. They're going to control your foreign policy. So what's going to happen when they build a police force and a detention infrastructure aimed right now at immigrants, and that situation resolves itself one way or the other? What do you think? They're just going to fire everybody? They're just going to defund it? They're just going to shut it down? No, man. Now you got a big business. Now that's going to represent a big part of the economy. They got to keep it going. How you going to keep it going? You got to find more and more reasons to arrest people. You got to find more and more reasons to arrest. Guess who they're going to arrest? You.
They'll get there eventually. I heard somebody make a point that I think is a good one. You know, we hear a lot about homelessness, right? The homeless could be next after the immigrants. That could be the next undesirable group because, unfortunately, thanks to this big, beautiful bill, there are likely to be a lot more of them by the time the immigrants are out of here, right? By the time they do their mass deportations, you're probably going to have a lot of people living on the street because they got thrown off of their healthcare rolls or they went into medical bankruptcy and had to lose their house. Right. I mean, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at a population that is becoming economically more and more disempowered. We hear people, you know, complaining about the homeless problem all day, every day. Even the Democrats, you know, now they're admitting, oh, yeah, we let this get out of control. Well, you're going to have a lot of jails for homeless people in a few years. It's probably going to take a few years to get the immigrants out. Once they're out, the next group becomes the out group. That becomes the next scapegoat. They always have a scapegoat to trick you into living like slaves. You know, Tucker said on his Turning Point speech, he says, you have a right to question Epstein's connections to the Mossad because you're not a slave, you're a citizen. Well, you know, it doesn't feel like that. Doesn't feel like that so much. Doesn't feel, and it feels like that relationship to the state is very tenuous. It's very, very tenuous. So these are very serious times, and that's why I think it's important that people think about this immigration issue a bit more deeply because it's an issue that on its surface is very cut and dry. Well, you crossed that line. You're not supposed to be on this side of the line. We got to get you back to your side of the line, and then good luck, live your life. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. It's a lot bigger than that. There are a lot more moving parts to it than that.
Look at these guys who tell you they mean you well. Pigman, Howard Lutnick.
Yeah.
Besant, George Soros' golden boy. You really think that they worry about what's going to happen to workers, what's going to happen to the middle class? Do you really think that concerns them? Right. Every single time they get asked about this, they can't help themselves. They tell the truth. As soon as they get asked, well, do you think we really have the labor force to man these factories? Immediately they start talking about AI and automation.
Right.
Workers are the last thing they start talking about. Lutnick, Pigman over there, he'll pitch a crackpot scheme about how there's going to be great jobs coming out of DeVry in robot maintenance.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Which at that point, if you're going to be making $150,000 maintaining the robots, why would they put in the robots?
Why would they build them? Right.
Why would they build them if they're going to have to pay that much to maintain them?
Right. Exactly. It's like, why would the Democrats create the Epstein files hoax and then not release the files?
And then not release them, right? When they had the chance.
Creating the hoax and say you can release the files, yeah.
Hey, come see us on tour. We're going to be in Toronto, Red Bank, New Jersey, Northampton, Massachusetts, Concord, New Hampshire, Oxnard, California, Rutherford, New Jersey, New York, Edmonton, Calgary, and Vancouver. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.